So for the students that missed class today, we're going to make a video on, well, basically what we covered in class, the basic shell for our chicken racing game. So we'll start off, we hit create. I'm going to call it Chicken Racer. And then we want to save it someplace that, that we know where it is. I want to make sure that I keep the create folder on. I'll do browse. I have a folder, Godot, that I keep all of mine in. It's on my network, but put it wherever it is that you want to store it. Just remember where you're putting it. I'll hit select. Everything else, I'm just going to keep the same. So again, name it. Make sure that we're going to create a folder for this new project and where we want to save it. I'll hit create. Godot will go off, do its thing, create the project for us. And we are presented with this screen here. So this is the basic editor for Godot. Some of the terms I'm going to use are stuff that you would hear from Unity because I used Unity for such a long time. But we're working on learning the actual proper terms. So the scene doc over here is similar to the hierarchy that we get from Unity. Down here would be our project folder or the file system doc. I'm going to move this down a bit because we're not going to be using it a lot. Then of course we have the inspector and we have this one giant window that we can work in. We could also split this up if we really wanted to, where once we have a camera in the scene, it would be very similar to what we have set up for Unity. I've gotten used to only having the one big viewport. I kind of like it. But let's start off by making our chicken. So we want to create a node. So this would be something similar to what we've called a prefab. I'm going to hit the plus button because I don't want any of these. I could have also hit other node, but I've gotten in the habit of just hitting the plus. And I want something called an area 2D. There we go. It adds it up here. I do want to rename it so we can double click it. And I'm just going to call mine chicken. So what's special about an area 2D is when it collides with another area 2D, we can detect when those two things touch. That's going to come important at the end when we want to figure out who won the race. So we have this little warning sign here. It's because we're missing something. If you hover over it or click it, it'll tell you. What it wants is a collision shape 2D. So we can hit the plus sign. We only have one thing in our dock here. So we can't really select anything else. But if we had multiple things, select the thing you want, hit the plus button. We're going to look for a collision shape 2D. And as we add it, we can see that this becomes a child of the first one. So as we shrink up the parent, it hides all of the children. We got rid of the warning here, but now we got one over here. And this is because we want to set a shape. To start off with, I want to get the functionality of the game working. We can come back later and find some sprites to make it look pretty. So I'm just going to use this icon for our chickens. But first, we got to take care of this warning. We want a shape. So I'm going to select the collision shape, come all the way over here to the shape, and I want a rectangle, which is right here. And it gives me this little itty bitty rectangle. I don't know how big this has to be yet because I haven't added my sprite. So to add that sprite, I want it to be added to the root node, so the chicken. I'm going to hit plus, and I'm just going to look for a sprite. So we have sprite 2D. I'll hit enter. And it really doesn't matter. I like to have my sprite above the collision. It will matter if we had multiple sprites. Things are rendered from the bottom up. So whatever's on the bottom is seen on top of everything else. But for this, it really doesn't matter. So let's come over, make sure we have our sprite 2D selected. We come over to the texture. I'm just going to hit the drop down and I want to hit quick load. By default, Unity comes with this default icon that's used for your project. We can also use it for a sprite, and I often do for 2D games. And now we can see it over here. Now, if we take a look at the green and red lines here, this is your y-axis. This is your x-axis. The numbers get bigger on the x as you go to the right. The y numbers, they get bigger as you go down. These blue lines, they show how big your screen is. I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger. So I want to hit project settings or project settings. I'll come down to window, and right here we can set the width and the height. For me, I like to do 1920 by 1080. And once I've entered that in, I'm not going to worry about whether it's windowed or any of the scaling or anything like that. I'm just going to hit close. And if I zoom out now, I've got a bigger screen. Now, I don't need that many chickens to race. I could come in to my sprite and make it smaller by coming to the transform and playing with the scale. That's fine. I'm only going to have a few chickens racing across the screen, so I'll take the default size. But we have to come back to the collision shape 2D. I'm going to zoom in by using the middle mouse wheel. You can also use 2 fingers on the trackpad for those that don't have a mouse. And all I want to do is just grab these little dots, and I'm trying to encase around the edge as much as possible. So I'll grab this one, move it down. We can grab this one, move it over. And we don't really need it to be super precise for this game, because the way it works is our chickens race across the screen. Then when they hit that finish line, we'll detect to see who's first, who's second. So really all we needed was a collider just on this side, but we'll cover the whole thing. Now I'd hit Command S to save, or Control S if you're on Windows. And it's going to save it inside of your resource folder, which we can see is right here. And the name will be whatever you've named your actual root node. So I'll just save that. And we can see we've got my chicken scene here. That's all I'm going to do in here. We are going to come back to it. Take note, our scene is up here. If we hit the plus button, we get a whole new scene. Now for this one, I just want to create the field that we're going to race in. So I'll hit the plus, because I could start with a 2D scene, but I know for my very background, I'm just going to stick a color in there for now. So I'll use color rec, and I'll grab the corner, and you can go over the edges. Remember, you're only going to see what's inside of that rectangle as far as when you run the game. So I've got this big white box. I want it to be green. So I'll come up to the color. Maybe a bit darker green, around there. That's good. I'm going to rename this. I don't want it to be called color rec. I'm going to call it field, and then I'll save it. Now there's a couple more things I want to create. I could create them here, but I'm going to make them in their own scenes as well. And they are also going to be, well, the first one, yeah, we'll make them both color recs. I want the starting line. And this is just going to be a bar that goes across the screen. So again, it doesn't matter if it extends outside. We just want to make sure it extends the whole thing. And we can come in later and replace these with sprites. I'm fine with that. I want a brownish color. Maybe a little bit more brown. So around there. I'm going to save that. Called it starting line. And then I want to start adding these things to my field. So I'm going to go back to my field scene here. I want to add an instance of my starting line. The easiest way to do this is just to hit this little chain here, because we're going to instance something. We'll just click that on, click my starting line. That puts it right here. I don't quite want it there. I want to move it up ahead enough for a line of chickens to show up. So just like in Unity, we have the option to hit Q for our select tool. W grabs us the move tool. E, rotate. And then for scale, it's not R, at least not in the 2D mode. That goes to the ruler tool. For scale, we need S. But for this one, we just want to move. So I tend just to hit the W key, and we get our arrows. If I grab the red arrow and move it on that, all we see is, well, the only thing we can do is move on red on the X. If you really need to move on Y, we'd have to grab the green. But I just want to move it out, maybe a little bit more. Now I want to create a finish line for my chickens. But before we get there, let's actually add a chicken. So again, we want to instance something, but let's make sure we have our field selected, because when I instance a chicken, notice it is a child of the field. If we shrink down field, it's there. If you accidentally had the starting line selected when you did it, it's going to be a child of the starting line, and we don't want that. We want it to be a child of the field. Now I'm going to take my chicken. I'm going to move them on top of the starting line, just to show that if we had them up here and the starting line's down below, we'll zoom in, the starting line is rendered on top of our chicken, and we don't want that. So remember, whatever is rendered at the bottom is rendered on top of whatever is above it. So the chicken's rendered on top of the starting line, the starting line's rendered on top of the field. So I'll select my chicken again, make sure that the move tool is selected. I'm going to get them in place. And I'm going to want a few chickens here. So I'm just going to take this chicken, duplicate it, and then I'll just hold shift in the down arrow. Boom to about there. I can select both chickens again, duplicate them, and accidentally hit the wrong button. So with both of them selected, move my mouse back into this area, shift, move them down a bit. And I'm going to put at least 4 more chickens in here. So I'll select all of them. Again, duplicate, move my mouse over. 8's good. I'd like to get all of them here. I might have to go down to 7. Yeah, we'll just do 7. Kill that one. And then kind of center them. Doesn't have to be perfect. They're chickens. Okay, and then maybe we'll take that starting line, move it a little closer, but we're going to work on functionality. Let's not nitpick. Okay, so if we start it, nothing happens. We can see the scene. I guess we should look at that. I've hit this button here. This will run the current scene, which is our field scene. We haven't set a default scene yet, so for now, we're just going to run this one. So here we go. Our chickens are lined up. Not centered, but we should have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's because when I was centering mine, I was centering according to the width of the green. But if we take a look, that blue line, that's what we see in the actual game. So I'm going to move it over. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, so I want my chickens to move across the screen. If we take a look at all of our chickens here, we have this little movie clapper thing. I forget what they're called. But this means that there's a scene attached to our chicken. If I click any one of them, it's going to bring us into the actual scene for whatever it is we clicked. Now, I swore I clicked the chicken. Let's try this again. There we go. We went into the chicken this time. I want to be able to attach a script to this object so that it can move. So to do that, I'm going to select the root node. In this case, it's the chicken. And then we have this little scroll type looking thing up here with the plus sign. If we hit this, it's going to allow us to create a script. I'm going to keep all of the defaults here and just hit create. And here we go, our first script. I want to make it bigger text-wise, so I'm just going to hit Control plus, Command plus on a Mac. You could also hold down Control and scroll on the scroll wheel. Okay, so let's start off by just making it move across the screen. To do that, we have to access its position, and in particular, its position on the x-axis. And we want to add to it some random value. Now, we have a couple here. We have random range is what we want. We have the F version and the I version. But we want to work with integers, so I'm going to pick a randy range. And if we start off from 0 to, say, 500, I'm just going to save this off. So every frame, this is what process does. It fires every frame. We're going to take our X position and we're going to add a random amount of pixels to it from 0 to 500. I'm going to save this, come back to my field, go into the 2D mode. I'm going to hit run, and they just flew across the screen. We need to slow this down. And what we're going to do, if we come back into the script, this delta parameter that's passed in here, this is how much time passed from the last frame to the current frame. To normalize our frame rate across multiple different machines, I'm going to multiply the amount of pixels we get by the speed of the frames, or the time it took to render the frame. So I'm going to go run it again. And that does slow it down. I want a little bit more variation in movement. So right now, every frame, it's going to move between 0 and 500. I'm going to put a negative here. They're chickens. They can sometimes turn around and walk the wrong way.